When Disney and Lucasfilm released The Acolyte on Disney Plus, it got a lot of backlash, with most audiences just outright hating the show. And you can see this reflected in audience scores on many sites like Rotten Tomatoes here, for instance, where it only has a 19%. But there's a lot of people who try to defend this show by saying like, oh, well, this is just getting review bombed and the show was actually fantastic and only the racists and sexists don't like this. We've heard something similar from cast members. Joni Turner-Smith said that a few months ago, where it was racist pushback is why the show was getting so much bad press and all this other stuff. But now we're hearing that again from the wife of Leslye Headland, who was also one of the stars of the show. Leslye Headland's wife, Rebecca Henderson, once again blames fans for the Acolyte cancellation. Touts Star Wars show's ratings as though there's something to brag about. And this is in relation to new information that came out that said that The Acolyte was the second most popular Disney Plus show in the year. And while some people might take that as a point to brag about, when you really dive into it, it's not a good sign. And I will get more on that in a moment. But first, let's just kind of dive into what she's actually saying about it, because this just screams of someone trying to cope with the fact that they're a part of a terrible show. Now, I'm not going to necessarily begrudge people for being a part of something that doesn't do too well, because especially an actor, because a lot of the times the actor is just doing their job and they don't have any say in the creative aspect of the program that they're on. I only have issue when they start attacking the fans because they were voicing their displeasure in it. What is it? Amanda Stenberg. She kind of got a lot of heat during the show for a lot of her pushback attacking the fans. Since then, Joni Turner-Smith, like I already mentioned, came out to attack fans. And this one, Rebecca Henderson attacking the fans. Now, I can kind of understand this a little bit more since she's married to the showrunner, so she might take this a little bit more personally, but still, I think it's kind of a stupid thing to kind of dig this up, because it's basically settled at this point that The Acolyte was an awful show that Disney shouldn't have ever greenlit, but they did. I think it would be best for the people involved is to try to forget about it, but apparently that's not the case here. The cast of The Acolyte continues to tout the show's ratings despite the fact that the objective numbers show that hardly anyone watched it. However, this group of people seem insistent on doubling down on trying to blame anyone but themselves or creator, showrunner, and Harvey Weinstein's former personal assistant Leslye Headland for the show's cancellation. Instead, Leslye Headland's wife is putting the blame on where it belongs on, or where it really belongs on you and I guess me, basically blaming the audience. And again, like I said, I can understand her trying to defend her wife's show, but just take the L on this one and try to move on. The fallout for The Acolyte's disastrous performance continues, but rather than accepting reality, Leslye Headland's wife, Rebecca Henderson, has decided to lash out at fans. In a recent social media post, Henderson, who played green-skinned Jedi Master Vernestra Rowe in the series, a casting choice that I'm sure has nothing to do with being married to the showrunner, blamed The Acolyte's cancellation on its critics and Star Wars fans while touting misleading data about the show's performance. And they'll get more on why that data is a little bit misleading further on in this article. But this is a post that she made, looks like on her Instagram page, where it just has an image that says, "Tell me again they canceled the show because no one watched it and not because you know why," basically implying racist and sexist and other things like that. And it's a snippet from an article that says, "But juxtapose that with the fact that those big IP franchises were still the best performing series on Disney Plus, and the solution becomes unclear." Percy Jackson and the Olympians was top dog on Disney Plus last year with over 3 billion minutes viewed. And The Acolyte came in second place with 2.7 billion. Then it says below that, read the entire post here. So this is what she's trying to say is like, see, the show was actually popular and Disney shouldn't have canceled it because the show was doing good. And they only canceled it because they were caving to a lot of pressure from people online. Now, first of all, this doesn't make any sense on the surface of it, because Disney is not going to have something that's really successful and profitable to them and decide to cancel it because people online are making fun of it. They would just basically be like, well, if people online are making fun of it, but it's still a very successful show, well, then we'll just continue on with this, because as a business, we're going to make money. And if we're making money off of something, then if people don't like it online, well, then they're obviously in the minority in that one, and we don't have to listen to them. There's been lots of shows and movies that Disney has put out that people online have complained about that were successful and end up getting follow-up seasons and sequels. So this really just doesn't work on the surface of it, but just kind of look at further into these numbers and you can see why exactly Disney decided to cancel this show. Henderson shared a headline that promoted the Acolyte's ratings, describing the series penned by her wife as the second most watched show on Disney Plus in 2024, adding the snide caption, "Tell me again they canceled the show because no one watched it and not because you know why." You know what? Based on the obnoxious way she said that, coupled with the fact that she has to be intentionally trying to mislead and that this is an editorial where the editor can say whatever I want, I'm only referring to her as Leslye Headland's wife from here on out, capitalizing as though it's a proper noun even. Okay, yeah, whatever. I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense. I don't think she's necessarily even being intentionally misleading. I'm going to kind of push back on this article for that one. I think she actually just takes these numbers at face value when Disney tries to spin it as it's being something good. And I think she's really just so dense, she actually believes it. Much to the same way a lot of the actual fans of the Acolyte are kind of dense because once these numbers came out, we heard them kind of run with it. Seemed like basically saying the same thing, like, see, the show was popular and it was only just the angry people online is why it got canceled. It's like, no, either you're extremely ignorant, actually I would say ignorant to the point of being dumb, or you're intentionally lying. And I think a lot of the fans of the show are probably just in the former category. And I would even include Rebecca Henderson into that, someone who just hasn't really looked too further into it, just doesn't read past the headlines. While she didn't elaborate on what I meant, the implication is clear. Leslye Headland's wife appears to suggest that the Acolyte was canceled for reasons other than terrible ratings. And in the world of this cast, that typically means racism and sexism. This echoes comments made by series star, a term that's only appropriate because she burned out, Amanda Lesenberg, who played two characters with one facial expression. It is kind of funny that this is being editorialized like that. And always insufferable Jodie Turner-Smith. I previously mentioned that. So let's scroll further down to take a look at what these numbers actually mean and why they're not really saying what they think they're saying. So what is it? All right, where is it? Right here. Okay, as we previously reported, the Acolyte pulled in 2.7 billion minutes viewed, which might sound decent until you compare it to the industry standards. And this is for other series that came out last year too. And you can see this top 10 chart for original series. Number 10 is Love is Blind at 7.38 billion minutes viewed. So when you take into account that the Acolyte had 2.7 billion, it doesn't do too well when you're comparing it to other original series that came out last year. But also something of note, all these other series that are on this top 10 list, if you were, I don't know how much they spent on these other series, but the Acolyte costs so much for Disney. I think one Acolyte would cost more than any two of these other series combined. So when you take that into consideration, I think it makes sense why Disney decided to cancel, because it just wasn't a good investment, plain and simple. But some people just don't seem to understand that, or they refuse to try to consider that option because it doesn't coincide with their preconceived notion of the Star Wars fan base and the people who were criticizing the show that they were involved with. The lowest ranked show in the top 10 streaming originals of this year, Netflix's Love is Blind, pulled in 7.3 billion minutes viewed. That's nearly 3 times the viewership of the Acolyte. Meanwhile, Netflix completely dominated the rankings with 7 of the top 10 spots, while Paramount Plus and Amazon Prime also made the list. Disney Plus was completely absent. Let's put this in a similar terms. If the Acolyte is the second most watched show on Disney Plus, and yet it still wasn't anywhere close to being a top performer show in streaming, then what does that say about Disney Plus? And that's really what these numbers are. They're basically an indictment of Disney Plus as a platform, because the platform itself, it's not very successful with how much they spend on it. Yes, it has a big name surrounding it, but people just aren't really watching it, or at least they're not watching their original programming. And this is something that Disney's been struggling with for some time. They've been trying to say, well, it was supposed to be profitable at this point as of the last quarter, but and that's something that they claimed was going to reach profitability when they first launched it back in 2020, but we haven't been able to see that materialize so far. Now they're saying it's profitable when their streaming services are profitable, which includes Disney Plus, Hulu, ESPN Plus. So they try to lump all that together, but Disney Plus on its own is essentially a failed platform, or at least right now, because whatever they've done for it hasn't been able to work and it can't stand on its own. The only thing that's propping it up is the fact that Disney makes a lot of money elsewhere within their company, and they're able to kind of prop up Disney Plus as a result of all this. But if it was just a streaming platform with all these IPs, they really wouldn't be, I don't think they'd be around right now, but I don't know. We can speculate all day long about whether it would succeed or not if it was just the platform on its own. But I personally have my doubts. But again, this is basically numbers showing how bad the Disney Plus platform is. And even though they're one of the better performing series on the failing platform, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a good show. And that's why Disney was actually right to cancel it, because they can't keep throwing money at something because of a vanity project. They have to accept the fact that this is something that Star Wars fans didn't like, and it was actually even so bad where it tainted further future Star Wars series like Skeleton Crew, which by all accounts people say isn't necessarily a great show, but it's just an okay show. But it's nowhere deserving as bad of ratings as what it's getting. And a lot of people are saying it's because the Acolyte kind of tarnished not only the Star Wars brand, but any future Star Wars shows. So people aren't even willing to give them a chance. Maybe we'll see something for Skeleton Crew later on, or maybe there'll be kind of more people interested in it later on as time kind of settles down, and this will be considered maybe a forgotten gem or something like that. It's too early to tell right now, but one thing is for sure, the Acolyte, plain and simple, it failed because it was a terrible show that people didn't like. And the reason why it failed and why it was so terrible is because the people creating it were more interested in pushing an agenda versus trying to tell a good Star Wars story. And unless they actually learn that lesson and take that to future projects, we're just going to see more of the same. But I think there have been signs, or at least with some of the studios at Disney, that they are kind of learning their lesson, and they're going to backpedal on some of the identity politics aspects of some of their programming and some of their movies. But since a lot of their projects are so big, it's going to take some time before we see it fully materialize. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens 4, 5, 6 years from now, whether or not they've gotten away from those sort of things, or if they're going to just continue to double and triple down on them. But let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Do you think there's any saving Disney Star Wars at this point? Do you think they can turn away from identity politics and actually kind of restore the brand? Or do you think it's too far gone at this point? And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share this video out there, because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.